I'm Edward, the priest of St. Patrick's Cathedral, a place steeped in history, built in 1904 with stained glass windows that flicker in the candlelight like memories of a darker time. The clock had just struck midnight, and the church was silent, save for the occasional echo of the wind howling against the ancient stone walls. I had just finished my evening prayers when the door to the confessional creaked open, sending a chill down my spine. I wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. My heart quickened as I slid into the confessional booth. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," came the voice, low and hesitant. The man's tone sounded off, like it came from somewhere deep, far deeper than a mortal soul should go. I could sense it immediately, something unsettling in the air. It was pitch black in the booth, but I knew the man was sitting just across from me. "Go ahead, my son. Confess your sins," I said, trying to steady my voice. There was something unsettling about the air tonight. A thick, heavy silence pressed in from all sides. I've done terrible things," the man confessed, his voice quivering. I betrayed those I loved. I did things, unspeakable things, and I cannot escape them." His voice began to rise, trembling with a strange intensity. "I see," I replied softly. "God is merciful. He will absolve you if you are truly repentant." "Repentant?" He laughed, a dry, rasping sound that seemed to hang in the air. "You have no idea, Father. You don't understand what I've done, and who I've become." I tried to hold my composure. "Speak, my son, and let your soul find peace." The man leaned in closer, his breath now audible through the screen. "It's too late for me, Father. You can't save me." A deep, guttural growl escaped from his throat. My heart pounded, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The temperature in the booth dropped, and I could see my breath clouding in the air. Who are you?" I stammered, my voice shaking. There was a long pause, and then the voice, now dark and almost inhuman, whispered, "I've been waiting for you, Father. You see, you aren't just any priest. You're the one I've been looking for." My pulse raced as the words hit me like a thunderclap. "What do you mean?" The man's voice twisted, warping with malice, and I felt a cold hand, icy and unnatural, brush against my own in the confessional. "I made a pact long ago, Father. A pact with something, older than you can imagine. I had to take souls. But I can't anymore, Father. I need you to take my place." Suddenly, the screen between us burst open, and a grotesque, twisted figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes black and hollow, its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt an overwhelming sense of terror suffocate me. This was no man, this was something ancient, something evil. The figure lunged forward, its grip tightening around my throat, and I could hear its voice in my head, a whisper like rustling leaves. "Confess, Father, confess your sins, or you will join me forever." My mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and confusion. I had dedicated my life to God, to serving His flock, and now this abomination was threatening to tear me from the world I knew. The stained glass windows, once a comforting reminder of faith, now seemed to mock me with their flickering, distorted images. I gasped for air, my hands trembling, but I knew there was only one way out. I had to face it, confront the darkness that had waited for so long. I must choose whether I would escape the grasp of this monstrosity or become a part of its ancient, malevolent pact. The creature's grip tightened, cutting off my air supply. Darkness encroached at the edges of my vision, and I could feel the life draining from my body. In that moment, amidst the terror, a flicker of defiance sparked within me. I refused to be a pawn in this creature's twisted game. I was a priest, a servant of God, and I would not yield to the abyss. I gathered every ounce of strength that remained and pushed against the creature's grip. My voice, hoarse and strained, erupted from my throat. "I will not concede to your darkness. I refuse to become a part of your pact." The creature recoiled, surprised by my unexpected resistance. Its grip loosened slightly. I seized the opportunity, wrenching my head back and gasping for air. The cold, alien touch of its hand left a burning sensation on my skin, and a wave of nausea washed over me. "You are weak," the creature hissed, its voice a chilling rasp. "You will succumb to the darkness eventually. All mortals do." But I refused to believe it. I had witnessed countless miracles, heard endless confessions of human frailty and redemption. I knew that even in the darkest of hearts, a spark of light, a glimmer of hope, could persist. "I will not succumb," I declared, my voice ringing with newfound strength fueled by the very essence of my faith. "God's grace extends to all, even to the most wretched creature. I will not abandon his flock, nor will I forsake my duty." The creature's eyes, black pits of emptiness, narrowed. It seemed puzzled, as if it had never encountered such resolute refusal. It leaned closer, and I could smell the acrid stench of decay emanating from it. "You are different, Father. You are the only one who understands. You can feel it, can't you? The pull, the power, the whispers." And it was true. I could feel it. A strange energy pulsed beneath my skin, a connection to something dark and ancient. It was both terrifying and alluring, like a siren's call beckoning me towards the precipice of despair. I could almost see the shadowed world it promised, a world where I held the power to manipulate souls, to control life and death. It was a temptation, a terrible, enticing option to the pain and fear that currently gripped me. But I pushed the thought away. There was a different path. A path illuminated by forgiveness and understanding. I would not surrender to the darkness. "The whispers are a deception," I declared, my voice shaking but resolute. "They are a perversion of God's love. I will not be swayed by your lies." The creature let out a guttural cry, a sound that seemed to rattle the very foundation of the cathedral. Its form began to flicker, as if its very essence was being torn apart. The stained glass windows, bathed in a crimson glow from the setting sun, cast long shadows that danced across the ancient walls, creating an illusion of shifting forms that matched the creature's own flickering instability. "You cannot defeat me!" it shrieked. "I am bound to this place, to these souls. I will not be erased." "Then I will bring you light," I said, my voice strong and unwavering. "Redemption is not just for humans, but for all of God's creation. I will not let you claim any more souls, and I will show you that even in the deepest darkness, there is a path to grace." And with those words I began to recite the Lord's Prayer, my voice filling the cathedral with the comforting sound of God's words. The creature writhed in pain, its form flickering and contorting as the holy words washed over it. It was a struggle, a spiritual battle fought within the confines of the confessional. As I continued, the windows of the cathedral seemed to brighten. Light flooded the space, pushing back the oppressive shadows. The scent of decay gave way to the faint, sweet aroma of incense, and the air grew warmer, the chill dissipating. The creature's wails grew louder, then slowly faded into a whimper. Its form began to shrink, its once menacing features crumbling into dust. The last vestiges of its monstrous presence dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only a lingering silence that now held a sense of peace. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted but relieved. The ordeal had taken its toll, but I had survived. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, not through physical strength but through the unwavering faith that resided within my heart. In the aftermath, I spent days in prayer and reflection. The experience had shaken me to my core, and I knew that the memory of the creature would forever be etched into my being. But I also realized that the darkness was not truly gone. It was a constant reminder of the battles that rages within us all, the constant struggle between light and shadow. From that day forward, I continued my duties as a priest with renewed vigor. I dedicated myself to helping those who were lost and struggling with their own darkness. I learned that forgiveness and redemption were not just for those who had committed minor sins, but for all those who were willing to seek it, even the most monstrous creation. The stained glass windows of St. Patrick's Cathedral now held a renewed meaning for me. They were not just symbols of history, but a constant reminder that even the flickering lights of fading memories can illuminate the path towards hope and salvation, if only we dare to look into the darkness and invite the light to guide us. And thus, I continued my life as a priest, forever changed by the encounter in the confessional, forever bearing the burden and the blessing of having faced the ancient darkness and ultimately, through the grace of God, being instrumental in its demise. The church remained my sanctuary, a testament to the enduring strength of faith and the ever-present battle between light and shadow that rages within every soul. It was an ordinary evening when I decided to visit my local church for confession, as I had done many times before. The church was quiet, but there were a few families inside, some with their children, sitting in the pews. The soft murmur of their voices filled the air as I made my way toward the confession room at the back of the church. The familiar scent of incense and old wood greeted me as I entered the dimly lit hallway. The faint strains of a hymn, played on a distant organ, seemed to echo through the hallowed space, creating a sense of peace and calm. I paused for a moment, letting the serenity wash over me, a familiar comfort in the midst of my usual turmoil. As I stepped inside the small, dimly lit room, something immediately felt off. The familiar sounds of the church, the gentle rustle of people in the pews, the faint echo of a child's laughter, seemed to disappear. It was like someone had flipped a switch, plunging the entire church into an unnatural silence. I was alone in the silence, and it was unnerving. I sat down in the small wooden chair, trying to shake off the unease. The air grew heavy, like something was waiting, a palpable tension that tightened my chest. The silence pressed in on me, becoming a suffocating blanket, the kind that steals your breath and makes you want to scream. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive quiet. I tried to pray, to recite the usual litany of apologies and confessions, but the words caught in my throat. The small grill that separated me from the priest's side was shrouded in darkness, a stark black hole in the already dim room. I found myself unable to speak, paralyzed by a sudden, inexplicable fear. My mind raced, searching for a logical explanation, but found none. Was it the sudden silence? The odd feeling of isolation? Or was it something more? A shiver ran down my spine. I felt a cold draft, despite the warm air inside the church. It was a chilling sensation that seemed to burrow its way into my bones, making my teeth chatter. I glanced around the room, my eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to deepen and shift before my very own eyes. When I finally went to speak, my voice barely a whisper, I noticed something else that sent a chill down my spine. The light outside the room had dimmed, and when I checked the time on my phone, it was no longer evening. It was midnight. How could that be? I had only been in the confession room for what felt like a few minutes. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, a wave of pure, unadulterated terror washing over me. It was impossible. The church was usually open until 9 at the latest, and the last time I looked at the clock, it was barely 7. Where had the time gone? What had happened in that moment of stillness? Why did it feel like the world outside had slipped away? What was I truly walking into when I entered that confession room? I stood up, my legs shaky underneath me, and tried to open the door. It was locked. Panic started to set in. I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but only the chilling silence met my cries. The room, which had already felt oppressive, now felt like a tomb. Desperation gripped me. I frantically searched for another way out, my fingers tracing the walls, searching for a hidden switch or a loose panel, anything that could lead to an escape. But the confession room was simple and bare, with no alternative exits. The silence felt more menacing now, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I found myself staring at the grill, imagining eyes peering back at me, unseen judging, unseen waiting. It felt like something was watching me, something ancient and powerful. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, coming from the other side of the grill. It was a low, raspy whisper, barely audible above the oppressive quiet of the room. It was a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Speak," it whispered. "Tell me your sins." The voice was unlike anything I had ever heard before. It wasn't the soothing, comforting tone of a priest I was used to hearing in this very room. It was cold, devoid of any warmth or compassion, and laden with a strange, terrifying authority. I was frozen, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped within this silent, midnight tomb. "Speak!" the voice repeated, the whisper growing slightly louder, more insistent. "Don't you know why you are here?" I swallowed, my throat dry and scratchy. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a croaking sound. "It's not a priest you seek," the voice continued, and the whispering turned into a mocking, almost cruel laughter. "It's not absolution you need. You came seeking something more, something darker." The laughter echoed through the small room, bouncing off the walls and settling in my ears. I felt a chill run down my spine, and my skin prickled with goosebumps. The voice was right. I hadn't come here for forgiveness, not truly. There were things I had done, things I hadn't confessed, things that I thought were buried forever. "Tell me," the voice demanded. "What do you truly desire?" I struggled to answer. The darkness outside the grill, whatever was on the other side, seemed to press in on me. I felt a pull, a strange magnetic force drawing me towards it. "Power," I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. "I want power." A ripple of laughter, chilling and sinister, filled the room. "Power," the voice echoed, the word a cold and heavy thing within the confines of the confession room. "Ah, power. You've come to the right place for that." The darkness behind the grill seemed to shift, a subtle movement that sent a jolt of terror through me. I felt a strange energy radiating from the unknown being on the other side, a tangible force that seeped into my very soul. "But power comes at a price," the voice continued. "A price you must be willing to pay. Are you ready to pay it?" My mind raced. I thought of everything I had ever wanted, all the things I had ever desired. And I realized that I had been willing to sell my soul for it all. "Yes," I breathed, the word a sigh, a surrender to the dark force that now held me in its sway. "Excellent," the voice hissed, a sound that scraped against my soul. "Then let the bargaining begin." I don't exactly know what happened next. The darkness behind the grill seemed to surge forward, and I felt a cold, pulsating energy enter my body, coursing through my veins. It was a sensation both terrifying and exhilarating, a power I had never felt before, a power that filled me with a strange sense of triumph and horror. When the ordeal was over, it was dawn. The church was once again bustling with life, the faint scent of incense mingling with the smell of fresh coffee and pastries. I emerged from the confession room, a changed man. The events of the night before were etched in my mind, a haunting reminder of the power I had bargained for. I was no longer the same man who had walked into the church on that ordinary evening. The world around me felt different, heightened. I felt a new energy coursing through me, a power I could sense, a power that was mine to control. But the price of that power? It was a price I was yet to fully understand, a price I was yet to pay. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that its demands were only just beginning. The night in the confession room had opened a door into a world beyond my comprehension, a world where the line between good and evil was blurred, a world where power was a dangerous, seductive mistress, and I was now her willing, albeit terrified, servant. It was a quiet evening at the church, the air thick with the scent of incense, and the distant sound of a lone bell tolling in the night. As I sat in the confession booth, I had grown accustomed to the familiar voices of the faithful seeking absolution, the weary souls burdened by guilt, shame, and regret. My job was simple: to guide them toward redemption, to remind them of the grace of God that could heal all wounds and lift the weight of their sins. I'd been a priest at St. Michael's for 5 years, long enough to witness the spectrum of human frailty. There were the young men confessing youthful indiscretions, the mothers burdened by the anxieties of motherhood, the businessmen wrestling with ethical dilemmas, and the elderly, their voices raspy with age, seeking forgiveness for a lifetime of regrets. Each confession was a unique tapestry of human experience, a raw and vulnerable glimpse into the heart of another soul. In the quiet darkness of the booth, I felt a profound sense of purpose, a connection to something larger than myself. My role was a sacred trust, a bridge between the penitent and the divine. But that night, everything changed. A woman entered the confessional, her footsteps slow and deliberate, the door creaking as she sat down on the opposite side. She spoke first, her voice soft and melancholic, as if each word was heavy with sorrow. "Father," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I am a widow, my husband gone these many years. It was unnatural." She spoke of her deep grief, the loneliness that had consumed her, and how she had struggled to find peace in her heart. The details were hazy, shrouded in the fog of time and anguish. Her husband's death, she claimed, was a mystery, a tragedy that had left her emotionally shattered. She spoke of sleepless nights, haunted by visions, and a sense of isolation that clung to her like a shroud. At first, her story seemed genuine, a heartbroken woman looking for solace. Her voice, though laced with sorrow, had a natural cadence, a warmth that suggested sincerity. But then something began to shift. There was an odd sensation in the air, a thick tension that seemed to pulse with each word she spoke. It was subtle at first, a prickling at the back of my neck, a faint unease that I couldn't quite place. Her voice began to change, growing lower, smoother, and somehow more seductive. It was like listening to a practiced musician slowly shift from a simple melody to a more complex, haunting piece. The sorrow remained, but it was now interwoven with a hint of something else, something darker. I could hear the faintest tremor of something beneath the surface of her words, something that made my skin prickle with unease. I've found myself drawn to things I never thought I'd desire," she confessed, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Things that are forbidden." As she continued, her tone shifted again, this time into something unmistakable. There was a cold, magnetic allure in her voice, as if she were no longer the widow she had claimed to be, but something far older, far darker. The warmth had vanished, replaced by a chilling intensity. She spoke of desires, of temptations she had long suppressed, and of a hunger that had never been fully satisfied. Her words became laced with lust, and I felt a chill creep down my spine as I realized this woman was no longer the person who had entered the booth. "I crave things I shouldn't," she continued, her voice now a silken purr. "Things that whisper promises of power, of ecstasy beyond anything I've ever known." With a shudder, I tried to maintain my composure, reminding myself that I was there to help her find redemption. But the room felt colder now, the faint glow of the candles flickering unnaturally. I asked her to confess her sins, to lay bare the darkness that weighed upon her soul. But her reply sent a wave of dread through me. "I've done more than sin," she purred, her voice now thick with an unnatural resonance. "I've embraced darkness. I've invited it into my soul." The words hung in the air, their meaning sinking in like a weight on my chest. My heart raced. I knew something was horribly wrong, but I couldn't pull away. It was as if some force beyond my understanding had me tethered to the booth, unable to move, unable to breathe. Then came the sound, a low, guttural laugh, one that made the very walls of the confessional shudder. It wasn't the laugh of a woman, it was something demonic, something ancient, something hungry. The woman's voice no longer sounded human, but a twisted, mocking parody of it. I could hear the voice of a creature that had lived for centuries, a being that had fed on the desires and sins of the innocent. "You think you can save me?" the voice hissed, dripping with malice. "I was never meant to be saved. I am beyond salvation." The booth seemed to close in around me. The air turned heavy, suffocating, and I could feel the oppressive weight of darkness pressing against me, as though the very walls of the church were closing in. I tried to pray, to call on the grace of God, but my words faltered, swallowed by the overpowering presence that had taken hold of the woman. "Do you know what I truly desire?" she asked, her voice now a seductive whisper. "I want your soul. I want you to embrace the darkness with me." I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed, trapped in the booth. Her voice seemed to swirl around me, drawing me deeper into the abyss. I could feel the cold tendrils of fear wrapping around my heart, constricting my breath. Suddenly I felt a presence beside me, not a man of God, but something far more sinister. A shadow, dark and towering, loomed in the corner of the booth. It wasn't just the woman anymore. Something had come through with her, something that felt ancient and hungry. I could feel its eyes on me, its hunger crawling under my skin. "Confession can't save you," the voice whispered in my ear, sending a wave of terror through my body. The voice was deep, resonant, and laced with a cruel amusement. "But I can give you power. I can give you everything you desire, in exchange for one thing, your soul." The room spun. My heart pounded like a war drum. I had to escape, but I couldn't. I realized then that this confession had never been about redemption. It had been a trap, a lure for a soul desperate enough to fall for its twisted promises. I was the one being tested now, tested by forces far darker than I could comprehend. The words tumbled out, a desperate plea for salvation. "In the name of God, I cast you out!" But the laugh that followed wasn't just the woman's. It was an echo, a chorus of voices, all laughing at me, mocking me. The darkness tightened its grip, and I knew then that no prayer could save me from what had already been unleashed. The confessional door slammed open with a force that made the entire room tremble. I stumbled out, my legs shaking, my mind reeling. The church was no longer the place of sanctuary it had once been. The air was thick with malevolence, the once peaceful ambience now tainted by something far more sinister. And the woman? She was gone, vanished as quickly as she had appeared. But I could still feel her presence, the presence of the demon that had inhabited her. A demon that had come for my soul. I could hear whispers now, slithering through the shadows, weaving through the stained glass windows, a chorus of voices that seemed to seep into the very stones of the church. It was a cold, insidious presence, clinging to the walls, lurking in the corners, and it was growing stronger. It was then that I realized I had made a grave mistake. I had invited something into the church that night, something that was never meant to be there. And now, it was watching me. Waiting. The bell tolled again, its sound now a chilling reminder of the darkness that had infiltrated the sanctuary. I was no longer a priest offering solace to the burdened. I was a prisoner in my own church, haunted by the shadow of the woman and the entity she had brought with her. The days that followed were a blur of fear and uncertainty. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. The shadows seemed to deepen, the corners of the church taking on a malevolent life of their own. I tried to pray, to find solace in the scriptures, but the words felt hollow, my faith wavering under the weight of the unseen presence. I consulted with my fellow priests, but they dismissed my concerns. They couldn't see what I saw, hear what I heard. Some were dismissive, others fearful. None offered real comfort or guidance. I felt increasingly isolated, adrift in a sea of doubt and terror. The church, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a prison. The familiar rituals, the comforting hymns, the stained glass windows, all of it was tainted by the memory of the widow's confession and the chilling laugh that had followed. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every creak of the old building, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sent a jolt of terror through me. I spent my nights huddled in my chambers, clutching a worn Bible, desperately seeking some divine intervention. I started seeing things, shadows flitting in my peripheral vision, whispers in my dreams. The darkness was seeping into my mind, eroding my sanity. I began to question everything I knew, everything I believed in. One evening, I found myself drawn back to the confessional booth. It was as if an unseen force was pulling me towards it, a morbid curiosity that I couldn't resist. I stood there, the heavy wooden door creaking open, and gazed into the darkness. The whispers were louder now, closer. Suddenly, a cold hand brushed against mine. I jumped back, my heart racing. "You've been expecting me," a voice hissed, the same seductive voice of the woman, laced with a cruel amusement. The shadows danced around her, her eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. "You underestimated me," she continued. "You thought a simple prayer could banish me. You were wrong." The shadows swirled around her, coalescing into a grotesque figure, the embodiment of pure evil. It was the entity she had unleashed, and it was hungry. I knew then that there was no escaping it. The darkness had taken root, and it would not be easily banished. My faith, once a steadfast shield, had been chipped away, leaving me vulnerable. "You think I am a danger to your soul alone?" the figure hissed. "I've come for this entire church, this entire town." I faced my fear, looked the abyss in the eye. "Then I will stand against you," I declared, my voice trembling but resolute. "I may be broken, but I will not surrender." The battle was a long one, a struggle for my soul, for the soul of the church, for the souls of the town. And in the ensuing battle between light and dark, in the struggle against a power I could not fully comprehend, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. It's been years now. The scars of that night remain, etched deep into my soul. The church still stands, but it's not the same. It's a place of constant vigilance, a reminder of the fragility of faith and the ever-present threat of darkness. Some whispered that the woman's curse was broken, others, they said, it was just beginning. I still wear the priest's robe, but my faith has been reshaped, tempered in the fires of that dreadful encounter. I no longer see my role as a simple guide to redemption. Instead, I see it as a constant battle against the darkness that lurks within and without. I learned that night that confession can be a double-edged sword. That forgiveness is a precious gift, but it can only be offered when the darkness is truly confronted and understood. I learned that sometimes, the most terrifying things are not the creatures that dwell in the abyss, but the desires that lurk within our own hearts. And I learned that even in the darkest hour, a spark of defiance, a flicker of hope, can be enough to light the way. The bell tolls in the distance, a mournful melody that echoes through the empty halls of St. Michael's. It is a constant reminder, a reminder that the darkness never truly leaves. It waits, watches, and whispers. But I am prepared. I am ready. For I now understand, the real battle for salvation is not fought in confessionals or in grand pronouncements, but in the quiet corners of our souls, in the constant struggle between light and shadow within each of us. And that battle, my friends, is one we must fight every single day.